Buckle up, folks, and welcome to a deep dive through the mythology of the Boy and the Heron. You clicked on this video, now don't you dare look back. Just walk slowly backwards out of the graveyard. As it turns out, Miyazaki's worlds are a mixture of mythological, literary, ideological, and historical influences, along with just a bunch of weird, strange things that come straight out of Miyazaki's imagination land. So it can be very hard to find Miyazaki's mythic influences, if he even had any. But I've been doing some research and I think I unearthed some gold, folks. I found interesting connections from all over the world, and I'm hoping that you all will find them interesting too, so let's get right into it. First, a thank you. I've been getting an unreal amount of support lately, and it's truly been a humbling experience. So I just want to thank everyone who's subscribed and watched my wish video, because you have made one of my dreams for a really long time come true. That said, if you haven't subscribed to me yet, what are you doing? Don't you realize I'm the next big thing in the movie review internet? I'm gunning for Shifrillis' throne here. I can't have you mindless baby souls dilly-dallying. Go on, hit that button. We're going to 10,000. Mythology inspires a lot of our modern stories, some more subtly and some not so subtly. Miyazaki films are at once a pleasure and an aggravation for me, because they're subtle in their influences and creative in the way all films should be. Goodness knows we need some creativity these days, but they sometimes end up being so subtle that they remind you of mythology in a way you just can't put your finger on. And for gosh sakes, I want to put my finger on it so bad. That sounded weird. Anyway, back to the movie. I think it's pretty well known at this point that The Boy and the Heron was primarily inspired by Miyazaki's life and career, with the granduncle representing Isao Takahata, Miyazaki's fellow director and friend, Birdman representing Toshio Suzuki, a producer on several of Miyazaki's films, including this one, and Mahito himself representing Miyazaki. But in this video, we're not interested in the meaning of the actual story. Psh, what? Did you think this was some kind of movie review channel? No, but really, the subject of Miyazaki's biography has been gone over again and again, so I'm going to be focusing more on where the world-building ideas come from. Things like the Birdman's shapeshifting and illusions, and the Warawara's floating up to the world to be born. And we'll have a look at mythologies and ideologies that may have influenced those ideas. The first and most obvious mythical influence is on the basic structure of the story in Mahito's arc. His story follows the basic building blocks of the monomyth, a nearly universal pattern in mythology where the hero is called into the unknown world to complete a task, goes through trials and meets monsters and friends, and finally completes the task and returns changed in some way. But that isn't the only influence he may have had. In Shinto, one of the most widespread religions in Japan, there's a medieval code of conduct called Bushido, or the samurai virtues. In it, there were 8 different virtues that defined a true warrior: justice, courage, mercy, politeness, honesty, honor, loyalty, and self-control. Mahito exemplifies a bunch of these. He shows courage when he plows ahead into the forest in the tower despite Kiriko's warnings. He shows mercy and politeness when he helps Birdman pluck up his beak. He shows honesty by admitting the malice inside him. And he shows self-control throughout basically the entire movie. I mean, man doesn't really have any emotions to control. It is worth noting, however, that Bushido also had a rather extreme nationalistic tint, i.e. samurai having to you-know-what themselves when they dishonor their country. And Miyazaki isn't usually very thrilled about nationalism, so... Above the entrance to the Granduncle's tower is inscribed the following, which means, "Divine power created me." This is a quote from Dante's Inferno, a book written by an Italian guy in 1321 who wanted to see his enemies burn in hell. In the book, the quote is written on the gateway to hell, along with a bunch of other weird and spooky things about death. This drives home the idea that the world the boy is headed to is the world of the dead, or an afterlife of some kind. But this specific line is a great fit for the movie because the world below indeed seems to have been created through divine rock power of some kind. And it's also one of the more optimistic sounding lines on the gateway, which fits with Miyazaki's recurring optimism in his films. After entering the strange and mysterious tower, Mahito uses an arrow fletched with one of Birdman's own feathers to shoot him. This concept crops up in one of Aesop's fables called The Eagle and the Arrow, in which an eagle is just minding his own business, flying along, when suddenly he's shot with an arrow and notices it has his own feathers on it. Oh no, I have been my own undoing, and such. In some interpretations of the story, this is seen as a punishment for pride, which Birdman seems to have in spades. That and stubbornness. We'll talk about the Birdman again later, so stay tuned. In the beginning of the movie, Natsuko tells Mahito that her granduncle had built a series of tunnels under the tower that were sealed off for being too dangerous. That and the fact that granduncle's world is decidedly depicted as being underneath our own world reminds me of, you guessed it, underworlds in various mythologies. In Chinese mythology, the underworld was called Diyu and was described as a maze of tunnels with various tortures hidden inside. And of course, there are iconic underworlds in like every other mythology you can think of: Mictlan from Aztec mythology and Hell from Norse mythology, and that's not even mentioning the Greek one, aptly named, the underworld. When Mahito discovers the graveyard, he is entranced by the shadows underneath a square stone structure reminiscent of Stonehenge. These structures are called dolmens, or portal tombs, and are found all over Europe and Korea. Their purpose remains mysterious, though some argue it was for burials. In Korea especially, remains of important people and their riches have been found within, and there are big groupings of them arranged in prehistoric graveyards. But what I find most interesting here is that the dolmens actually reappear in the movie in none other than Natsuko's birthing room, a place which should be associated with new life, but instead is surrounded by the shadows of death, making for a very dramatic stage for the most intense part of Mahito's character arc. After Kiriko saves Mahito from the pelicans, she takes him fishing. The two then prepare a soup from their absolutely Lovecraftian catch and serve it to the souls in the world below to give them the strength to fly up to our world and be born. This again brings to mind the Chinese afterlife Diyu. In Diyu, the route to reincarnation is marked by the Nehi Bridge, which one must cross in order to begin their next life. On said bridge is the goddess of reincarnation, Meng Po, who serves the souls of the dead a special soup which causes them to forget their previous lives, leaving them ripe for reincarnation. Pretty neat, huh? I like that one. In the movie, Mahito is watched over by the maids from his new home in the form of a herd of stout little dolls who stand around his bed. It's a bit of a stretch, but I'd say they bear some resemblance to Daruma Dolls, a type of Japanese doll modeled after a Buddhist monk who was known for being ridiculously persistent. As such, Daruma Dolls are said to help people accomplish their goals, and some are even weighted at the bottom so they get back up if you try to knock them over. In the movie, Kiriko specifically tells Mahito not to knock over the dolls, so maybe that's something. In a general sense, fire is seen by most cultures as being dualistic in nature. It has the power to give life, but simultaneously the capacity to destroy, which when you think about it, is probably the most perfect concept they could have thought of for this movie. The main theme of the movie is all about the duality of life, how friendships and joy can and must exist alongside horrors and death, and there are several examples of this. For one, there's the inscription on the gate to the graveyard, "All those who seek my knowledge will die." It implies that the pursuit of something valuable, knowledge, comes with the heavy price tag of death. The theme is present again when Hime saves the Warawara from pelicans, but has to sacrifice a few of them in the process. It's in equal parts tragic and beautiful, and despite Mahito's protests, Kiriko's reaction suggests it must be done. Hime exemplifies the theme again when she argues with Mahito about returning to their world. Mahito tells her she can't go back or she'll die, but she assures him she isn't afraid, insinuating that no matter the cost, life is worth it. All this can't help but bring to mind the classic Confucian concept of yin and yang, the idea that the world is made up of conflicting forces that must coexist and be in balance. And here's me getting a little reviewy, but I love movies that have this theme, and Miyazaki handles it so well. He doesn't shy away from making us feel or see the bad, and the bittersweetness is a breath of fresh air in a world where art is often all bitter or all sweet. Above Natsuko in the birthing room hang hundreds of thin, oddly shaped papers that bear some resemblance to Japanese Ofuda. These are slips of paper, sometimes made of other materials like wood, that contain prayers for protection, luck, or help in certain areas of life. There are specific charms for health during pregnancy called onzan, but I wasn't able to find any that looked more like the ones we see in the movie, so let me know if anyone has any more information on this. When Mahito finally makes it to the top of the tower, he comes upon a bright trapezoidal Oh my goodness, it's such a hard word. When Mahito finally makes it to the top of the tower, he comes upon a bright trapezoidal door, which leads to the granduncle's room. Trapezoidal doors have been used in ancient architecture, particularly that of the Incas and Egyptians. In the Incan Empire, they were simply sturdier and could withstand earthquakes better than regular doors and windows. But there's an example from the Great Pyramid of Giza that I found more interesting. Inside the Great Pyramid is a long passageway called the Grand Gallery. The Grand Gallery has a high ceiling, almost 29 feet up, and the walls are made of stacks of stones that slightly overlap each other, creating a trapezoidal shape. I like this connection because it reiterates the below world's association with death, and I guess I'm a nihilist or something like that. Also, after entering through the door, the Parakeets even mention that the world beyond looks like paradise, which links up these two references pretty well in my opinion. And now we come to Birdman himself. In Greek mythology, herons were seen as messengers for the gods, which is sort of like the role Birdman plays in the beginning of the movie. He comes from the below world to lure Mahito in so that the granduncle, creator of the world, can ask him to be his successor. In Celtic mythology, herons symbolize the supernatural forces that exist between land and water, which suggests they're being associated with a magical world different from our own, just like Birdman. Shapeshifters are everywhere in mythology, especially ones that use their supernatural powers to lure in unsuspecting victims and gobble them down like maniacs. There's even one specific to Japanese legend, called Kitsune, an immortal fox that can transform into a human woman to lure in an unsuspecting straight man. But Birdman's inability to transform into any other animal, along with his seeming dependence on his heron skin to be intact, reminds me more of Selkies from Celtic mythology, who can only transform into seals when in possession of their seal skins. But there's a better explanation, one that immediately struck me as an inspiration for Birdman when I first watched the movie. He reminds me of the Trickster, a figure in most mythological pantheons whose motives and morals are sometimes hard to pin down. They're sometimes mischievous, sometimes just plain evil, and sometimes kind or helpful, but they're commonly shapeshifters who like to cause trouble in some way. Take Wisakejak from Korean Algonquin mythology, for example, or even Dionysus from Greek mythology. But the one I like best is Loki. In the actual Norse myths, Loki was a shapeshifter who often used his powers to create trouble for the gods, but was also often the one that the gods called on to solve that trouble, bringing to mind Birdman's great position in the story where he can quickly go from hurting Mahito to helping him with little transition in between. And finally, the Parakeets. Get ready for this one because it's a bombshell. Yeah, these guys don't have any mythic inspiration. Miyazaki probably created them on crack. And so we come to an end, folks. What did you think? What do you like best about the movie? Know any other cool mythology connections? Leave them for me in the comments. I have created the stack of stones that is this video, and now you must add your own stone. But please don't imbue them with malice. Wow, that metaphor worked better than I was expecting. Anyway, thanks for watching. And in a final note, if any of you are interested in the mic I used to record this video, I put a link to it in the description down below. You can get it refurbished for super cheap, so I think it's well worth looking into if you're a beginner YouTuber like me wanting to boost the quality of your videos. And with that, I'll see you later, parakeets. Au revoir.